Very good morning and welcome back to Citizen Power Breakfast. Now, as we had mentioned before, we're going to be discussing the marriage bill. Now, the marriage bill 2012 has been controversial, drawing sharp reactions from various quarters. Now, it was tabled in Parliament last week and the fate of the bill is yet to be decided. Essentially, the bill emphasizes that a marriage is between a man and a woman, and it provides that marriage is a voluntary union of a man and a woman, whether in a polygamous or a monogamous union as registered in accordance with the Act. Well, today in studio, I have Judy Thongori, a family lawyer who is here to discuss the marriage bill and answer any questions that you may have. So please send in your queries to 22422 with your name and location. Welcome, Judy. Thank you so much for joining us and taking the time to be here in studio.
Thank you for having me.
So I guess we should start by just establishing what are the differences between the proposed marriage bill 2012 and the current legislation governing marriage.
Okay, first of all, the current legislation is spread over 7 acts. And those acts came into being between 1902, that's when the Marriage Act that we have came into being, and 1960. Going forward, we're going to have one Marriage Act so that you don't have to navigate through 7 acts to know what your rights and responsibilities are. And then the bill, if it becomes law, contains harmonized codification of the laws, so that there is equality in the legal status of the marriage, so that the provisions are not contradictory as happens in the case. But even more, that customary unions have not been part of the 7 acts of parliament that we have had. Nonetheless, customary unions have continued side by side with these marriages under the Act. As a result, there has been confusion as to what status to accord to them. People do not know whether they are legally married because there is no act that they can go to. So now you have in here customary unions as well. So you know what? It's a one-stop shop, just like a supermarket. You get in there, you get all you want.
One-stop shop.
Indeed.
Okay, I guess we should start from the beginning,
Yes.
the proposal, the promise to marry.
Yes.
Now, it says that damages are recoverable by a party that suffers a loss when the other party refuses to honor the promise
Indeed.
to marry. So I'm curious, what constitutes a promise to marry, and what is this damages that can be recoverable?
Interesting. You will remember, of course, at the beginning of that section says that a promise to marry is not binding, except to the extent of that subsection. The subsection that says that for loss suffered, you may recover damages. 2 key words is may. Not binding for one, and B, may recover damages for loss suffered. So it's not in every case that you will recover damages. It is in a case, I suppose, which in the discretion of the court is deserving. What's a promise to marry? It's, I guess, a promise to marry, a promise that I will marry you. And by the way, this is not just about men making promises and then failing to honor them. It's also about women making promises and failing to honor them. What I do know is that it's very important to understand that it will not just happen. I mean, it's expected in the course of human life that you will make a promise that you may not honor. And there are many reasons, including the fact that, do young people, Mutegi, do they say, I've grown out of you? That too could happen. I think it's the court will look at the circumstances of the situation. To what extent have you misled the other person? And perhaps all the time you knew that you were never going to marry them. So I suppose what we call even malice, you know what I mean? You were malicious, you had that in mind and what have you, as you misled the other person, you'll be considered. But it's not to say that it will interfere with your ability to change your mind. You absolutely have to be able to change your mind.
We've seen a situation where young women are taken to college by men who want to marry them.
Yes.
They go and get degrees. Maybe one is a teacher, the other goes and gets a degree and becomes an important person.
Yes.
After going graduating, they die.
Yes.
They don't marry the men who educated them. Is that what we're calling loss?
It could be. It could be. I mean, if you took me to college on the basis,
that you are
indeed,
you are my girlfriend.
Yes, exactly. First of all, you can't force somebody to marry you just because you took them to college. Very well, you took them to college.
That's why I took them to school.
True. True.
Talking from
they promise you,
experience,
but what you must know
Yes.
is that you can't force that person to marry just because you have invested heavily, financially or otherwise,
yes.
into that person.
Yeah.
However, whereas that person has the right to duck and walk, because it is indeed a constitutional right, that person nonetheless may pay you for what you may have suffered as a result. So I think it's fair. Both ways. You remain with your money, I remain with my freedom.
Okay, well, interestingly, the new bill also stipulates that there'll be 2 certificates issued, so that's something to be clarified. And I'd like you to also discuss what types of marriages are recognized under this bill.
I see. Shall I say, okay, let me start from the first one, which is the civil marriage, which is a marriage that will be celebrated before a director or a marriage registrar, as the case may be. And then there's
one you call it AGs.
The ages, indeed. Currently, we actually you're right. You're right, Motegi. That's the one that becomes a civil marriage. Indeed. Then there's a Christian marriage that will be celebrated in a place of worship by a minister who is authorized by the law to do so. And then there is the Hindu marriage. There is Islamic marriage. Of course, those ones, it's clear. I mean, what Hindu marriage is and what Islamic marriage is. And then there is the African customary marriage, which will be celebrated in accordance with the customary rights of one or both parties, and which will be evidenced by a declaration that is signed by 2 witnesses who are there and who are witnesses to the happening of the rights under the custom. It does not recognize, however, the come-we-stay unions, which is probably what people need to consider could be put in at some point in the course of the debate.
Okay, fantastic. So seeing as we're talking about, you just mentioned the customary marriages, so the new bill seeks to codify aspects of it. What about dowry? Is this still recognized in part of it? And in the case of a dissolution of the marriage, what happens with the dowry? Is a bridegroom family, can they recall the dowry? Or does the bill actually stipulate anything around that?
I see. Interesting. You see, under customary marriages, most, if not all, customary marriages in Kenya, dowry is an important part. What the bill is saying, that if dowry is required to be paid, a token payment of that dowry will be sufficient, for purposes of a marriage. And you know why? Many young men cannot pay, dowry these days. So what are they opting to? To perhaps come and stay unions because of the amount of dowry that will be asked. And what the bill is saying, a token, because it's a good custom, I suppose, when...
What if the in-laws refuse the token?
Well, I don't know. The law says that a token will be sufficient. So I do hope that they will accept the token.
Can they be forced? If I am this very father of a very beautiful woman, I've gone out to token in university, she has PhD, and then you give me token. Say, no, I don't want token. I want full dowry, according to marriage customs.
Now,
can the law force me to accept?
Yes, your daughter...
Or they ignore me and get married?
Yes, your daughter may well ignore you, because she has a right to get married beyond you. She's an adult, and that is why one of the requirements under the bill is not that the parents will sign, that they have received sufficient dowry. What we require is 2 adults who are above 18 years old, who have given their consent knowing what they're doing, and other witnesses that have 2 other witnesses that have witnessed the happening of the rights of custom. So you will not be able to stop her. She will go ahead. And we are hoping also that moving forward, we can begin to recognize the dynamic socio-cultural environment in which we live, and that parents will allow their children to get married without bringing unnecessary obstacles, along the way.
Okay, well, maybe you could outline what the procedures are to be followed in the case of a customary marriage. Who is actually empowered to govern the marriage, and what is this sort of time period in which this all has to be concluded? You
mean the customary union?
Yes.
See, the rights of custom differ from community to community. There'll be I don't know whether they have an engagement period, Mutegi in some communities. There'll be the exchange of gifts or dowry, as the case may be. There'll be the elders coming over and what have you. Whatever period that it takes, the law is recognizing that custom will differ from community to community and respecting that, but saying that within 3 months of the completion of those rights, the custom rights, please register your marriage. And for purposes of registration of marriage, what you need to present to the director of marriages or the marriage registrar, for that matter, it is a declaration that says, we got married on this day, we have witnesses who have signed on to this. If it is a subsequent marriage, because you do know that customary unions are potentially polygamous, if it is, there will also be a declaration by the witnesses as to whether the other spouse was informed, or spouses were informed, and whether they gave their approval and what are the reasons for they not giving their approval. Very important, because I have had people say that consent is required, but no, it is not. What we've been told is, have the other spouses been informed, or spouse been informed? Have they given their approval? If they haven't given their approval, what are the reasons for not giving the approval? So consent is not per se required. You consent.
What do you mean? How can consent not be there and then you say approval?
Yes, it's interesting.
Is it not a contradiction?
No, it isn't.
Yeah.
When you agree to get married under a system of law that permits polygamy, you have consented that union could be polygamous, because it is clear, even in the bill, it says that it's potentially polygamous. So that's where you've given your consent. Thereafter, can you say no? You may say no, but that will not stop the spouse from marrying again. But nonetheless, your reasons, whether you said yes or no, your reasons, if you say no, your reasons for saying no will be recorded. But you shall be informed, which is very different from today. When you hear people saying that they did know that there was another, they didn't know that there was another spouse, this time they will be informed.
Okay, so seeing as we are discussing polygamy, which has been quite a controversial aspect, so you've sort of outlined the requirements. But I'm curious, the bill is all about gender equality, but does it go the other way around? Can a woman have multiple husbands?
I see it doesn't, because it's clear what it is, that a man may have 2 spouses, a woman may not. And it's an interesting discussion, and we've been asked this many times. Women who have fought for equality with men for a long time, human rights lawyers, how would you be the same persons to say that provisions on polygamy should stay? And there's a reason for it, because this bill isn't about me or you, Michelle, or you, Mutegi, in fact. It's about the Kenyan community. It is not seeking to legalize polygamy, and that's very important. It is seeking to recognize what actually exists. Michelle, if you step out of the studio, out there, and especially among our people down there, polygamy is real. Many of the people you see here, even in this studio this morning, are children of polygamy or spouses within polygamous unions.
Including
who
myself.
are we? Is that so?
Yeah.
Welcome aboard.
My father had number of wives.
Indeed.
Yes.
So who are we to sit in here and say that polygamy is not allowed under the Kenyan law? So it isn't about us, to legalize. It's actually about what has been happening. The dynamisms of this country, which may not suit me, but over which I have a choice, but which another person may not have a choice about. So yes, it's about inclusivity, the fact that this bill must include everybody in this country. It's also about reflecting the cultural setting we find ourselves in. It is so that everybody may be able to lift this bill, and to the extent possible, find that there are provisions that cover them. It is about, Michelle, sorry, can I just spend one more minute talking about this? Yeah. You need to know, and I did say this at the beginning, that we have 7 acts on marriage laws, and they have been there since the turn of the last century. 1902 is a long time ago. But they did not recognize polygamy. They did not recognize customary marriages. Nonetheless, and you will agree with me, polygamy has competed side by side with that which has been provided in the law. What am I saying? We can't wish it away. And in the meantime, people have suffered alienation. People have suffered uncertainty because they haven't known where they come in. So finally you get it all here and you get to know, so what does it mean to be polygamous? So do I get a certificate? Even though I'm in a polygamous union, you do. You don't have to line up elders, some of whom may have died with the passage of time, to come and prove that indeed you're married in a polygamous situation.
So in that case, if I get married in a Christian wedding, I go to a pastor, can I now go back and get married to another wife?
No.
Is it since polygamy is allowed, can I do, is it possible?
That's actually one of the questions that came in from Dorothy in Nairobi. She said, does the new bill make civil and church marriages potentially polygamous? Maybe you could enlighten us on that.
Very good question, Dorothy and Mutegi. No, it is very clear. Civil marriages, Christian marriages, and Hindu marriages are monogamous. And when we say monogamy, this time in this bill, we mean monogamy. And Islamic marriages and customary marriages are potentially polygamous, and that's very clear. I know that it's a very personal issue. You see, and that's why the marriage bill is very personal to everybody. It is right here because you're asking yourself, so if this becomes law, what becomes of the situation that I'm in? So I want to tell Christians and those married in civil unions and those married in Hindu marriages, the polygamy in here does not threaten you. It's one man, one wife to the exclusion of all the others.
Okay.
Can't I marry the way they do it now anyway?
Yes. How do they do it, Mutegi?
You go to a church,
Yes.
you get married, then you say you're no longer Christian. Then you go to and marry another wife in a customary marriage and pay dowry and like the way that Dalmas at I'm sure Dalmas at must have had a Christian wedding. But now he got married to a third wife through tradition.
I don't know, to be honest. I don't know about his situation.
Anyway,
but I'll tell you.
Is that illegal?
I'll tell you, it is illegal. We are clear. It's monogamous, Muteki. You remain monogamous unless your wife dies, unless they divorce, or there's an annulment of marriage. Yes, or there's an annulment of marriage. When you're getting into the next contract, you might choose polygamy. But for this time, you are not permitted to go beyond your one wife. It is important.
But you are saying, no.
Sorry.
You are saying this is to accept the status quo. How many people are married Christian, who are Christian married, and they have 3 wives?
No, Mutaki. There's a difference. If
Today,
you're married
as
today,
we speak today,
if you're married under African Christian Marriage and Divorce Act,
yes,
or the Marriage Act today, the ones of 1931 and 1902, even then, those unions are monogamous. It's one man, one wife, to the exclusion of all others, such that in your lifetime, no other person will be able to say, I'm your wife, legally, not in a court of law. And if they say that, they will not be upheld. You will lift up your marriage certificate, and I see many men doing this, and they use it as a shield. I am married in a system of law that does not permit polygamy. So during your lifetime, nobody ever can successfully claim to be a wife. You may have mistresses, because that is what, that's what happens in this country. Yeah. And you may call them wives in how do I say, in home, if you like, out of the law language, you see. But they are not legally wives. However, the children that you get out of those unions are your children. It doesn't matter that you didn't have a legal marriage with the mother by the time you got them. But also very important, and I'm sorry, Michelle, to push this a bit, because it's important. The law of succession today, however, creates another situation, because it says, even though when the man dies, even though he was married under a system of law that does not permit polygamy, such a person, the ones you're calling wives now, may be able to claim as wives under the law of succession only upon the death of the man, when he's no longer there to answer for his sins. Anyway, that is my addition. The last
that's
one.
interesting. Before moving, that's a very interesting part that I do want to delve into more, is in the case of one of the parties being deceased. But before we get to that, just to wrap up on this polygamy, I want to know, is there a limit to the number of wives? And if you enter into a polygamous marriage, can you then convert it to a monogamous one? If you could just clarify that for us.
Very good question, Michelle. Is there a limit to the number of wives? Depends on the community. I don't know whether under the Ameru community there is a limit as to the number of wives as far as your pocket goes.
The property. And the wives are also property.
No, they're not property. Don't even get there. Now that one will do away with the constitution. I don't think there is. I think the Muslims have a limit of 4 wives, but I don't know that there is any African community that limits the number of wives, that you can have. And once you're married under a system of law, once you choose polygamy, can you convert it into a monogamous one? You can, but only in the following circumstances, where you have only one wife, and where you both consent and put it down and sign a declaration and file it with the director that you have converted your union into a monogamous one. That luxury you lose.
What if I have 4 wives through customary law? Customary marriage, and then I want to ditch the others and I'll be left with only one?
No, you can't. You divorce them. You divorce them. You can't. You don't have the luxury. You lose it when you sign on potentially polygamous, and then you continue to get a number of.
So you have to go the process of divorce.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Divorce in African tradition is just abandon them.
Well, no, we have defined, no, my God, Mutegi, I hope you don't do that. I hope you don't do that, because it's far from it. It's far from it. You know what?
People do.
This bill is telling you, you must be serious about what you intend, because it's a very serious contract that you get into. When you tell somebody, come be my wife, and you fulfill the traditional rights, until you divorce them. In the same manner, Mutagi, you're not free to say, you're not my wife. You're not free to contract a monogamous union with one person. So I think in a sense it's a good thing that you have to sit and think, what do I intend for myself and for my family?
All right, so you had mentioned there about deceased, till death do us part. What does the bill stipulate for a widow?
Okay, the marriage bill doesn't quite, I mean, because the only thing it says is that, of course, once you're widowed, then you can marry again. You see, either the husband or the wife, as the case may be. But in terms of property management, when you're not there, your estate management, then we go into the Law of Succession Act, which kicks in, which needs reform as well, because in the circumstances of the African society, it was amended at some point soon after it came in 1981 to provide for polygamous union, even where there was none, in a manner, so to speak. Yeah.
Okay, well, before we go into the dissolution of marriage and what happens there if you get to the point of a divorce, I would just quite like you to explain this prenup and postnup agreements. You know, what are they for people who don't know, and what purpose do they serve?
I see.
So you must say what prenup and what those nups are.
Exactly.
What are you asking?
What are they?
Indeed. Let me start by saying prenups are agreements that people get into to govern their property and other issues in a marriage. The reason it's prenuptial is because it's before marriage. But you may also sign a postnuptial, like Mutegi in a marriage may decide to sign a postnuptial property, especially property, and the other things that may be important to you. How will that happen? Another key thing to say is that 1902 or 1904 Act, the bill that it exists is 1902. 1940 something Matrimonial Causes Act. The prenuptial and postnuptial provisions are there. So the current law we have allows the judge to inquire into prenuptials and postnuptial agreements that there may be. But that's a section we have not quite utilized, because I don't think that Kenyans are in the business of signing prenuptials and postnuptials. Going forward,
but young people probably may be interested in doing those kind of things.
Absolutely. So it's not in the bill, and maybe that's one of the things that people want to think about, that they could lobby their members of parliament to include going forward, because indeed, I think that's part of what we are doing when we say the law should respond to the dynamic socio-cultural environment. We're at a time when we know that part of what is causing strain in the marriage is matters property, and that perhaps if people sat and decided what they want to do with the property within the marriage, there would be less to get strained about. Because you see what? Young people and old people, when they get married, they focus on commitment and love. But commitment and love, and it's important, but it cannot sustain the marriage when conflicts on such heavy issues, come in. So perhaps if you tell the other person at the beginning, and perhaps even sign on what you intend with respect to property. And I know there are some people who are very personal about what they earn, Mutagi. So maybe you will say, for me, matters financial are very personal. I want to keep my money, but I'll put into the family bill, family account so much. Maybe the wife will say, I want to own my property, but I will contribute to the development or to the acquisition of the matrimonial property. So that when you get in and you see me buy a car in my name, you don't start sulking. When I see my husband buy something and put in his name, I don't start sulking, because that's what eventually becomes a big issue, and a very big issue, and you're beginning to ask, where did it start hitting you? Perhaps it started hitting you because you hadn't discussed those very important things. So we're saying, going forward, do Kenyans want prenuptials and postnuptials to be part of their environment?
Okay, I just want to sample some of the questions that are coming in before we move on to the dissolution of marriage.
Yes.
Okay, let's see here. I have Kamal who says, what happens if you are an atheist and you don't believe in God? What does the law say?
Well, civil marriages are available for Kamau. If he chooses not a Christian marriage, that's available to him.
Okay.
Just go to the AG chambers or go to the DC.
Yes.
That's what is called civil marriage.
Okay, all right. I have another question here. Someone who doesn't say their name saying, my husband has been separated from his ex-wife for 6 years now after a turbulent marriage. I moved in with him 3 years ago and are going for a customary marriage next week. Where is the law on this type of situation, and what potential problems do I face since they aren't divorced on paper?
Yeah.
If he's not divorced on paper, that means legally divorced. In fact, he's not divorced. Then he's not capable of contracting a marriage.
Even a customary.
Even a customary marriage, he's incapable. If it was a monogamous union that he was in, he's not capable. And therefore, the lady needs to ensure that he does what he needs to do, which is divorce. Yes.
Well, seeing as we are talking about divorce,
Yes.
the dissolution of marriage, what are the grounds for divorce? Let's start there.
I see. Under Christian marriages, the grounds are three. They're adultery, they're cruelty, and desertion for a period of 3 years. That's much of what we have in the law as we speak today. Under civil marriages, it is all three. That's cruelty, adultery, and desertion for a period of 3 years. There's also another one called irretrievably broken down marriage. But to prove that the marriage is irretrievably broken down, you need to show adultery, cruelty, neglect, or any other reason that the court may consider sufficient.
So you mentioned 3 years.
Yes.
There's a time period?
A desertion.
Okay.
If you choose, even now we have that, if you choose the ground called desertion, and we say it's quite a clean one, because you don't have to wash dirty linen if you like. All you need to prove to the court is that you've been deserted or you have not been together, for a period of 3 years. Then you don't have to wash any other linen, apart from that. The only requirement is that you have to have stayed deserted or separated, as the case may be, for a period of 3 years.
Okay.
Without 3 years, you have to suffer for 3 years.
Not at all. Because see,
if my wife deserts me for 2 years,
yeah,
do I have to wait for another year before I go to look for divorce?
interesting. For you to be able to qualify for divorce on the basis of desertion equals 3 years
Not less.
suffering, if you like. Exactly. But you also have the other grounds. You can use cruelty, and cruelty can be mental,
She has been
physical.
beating me, yeah.
Oh, I mean, absolutely. Or you beating her. And then there can also be adultery. You see, you have other grounds, and you don't have to have 3 grounds. You can take one of them. But for those who wish to wait for desertion, then yes, you have to cool your heels for 3 years.
So when it comes to divorce, what happens with the separation of assets and the annulment of the marriage?
Okay, I guess we talk about what the law provides now, and then say that we have a bill that perhaps we should make the subject of discussion on another occasion, that we'll be discussing matrimonial property and what will happen to matrimonial property. Currently, we're limping very badly, because we apply an act of England of 1882. We have not had any reflection on what we want to do with our matrimonial property in our country. And so what has happened is that courts over time have made law. In 2007, February of 2007, the court said that you need to show contribution in respect of property that is acquired during the marriage but is registered in the name of the other spouse. So if I'm seeking to claim property registered in Mutegi's name, I need to be able to show that I contributed and that the contribution was financial. But over time, we have the Land Registration Act that came, I think, into being the other day. Was it last year but one? And it has said that in respect of property that is owned by one spouse, contribution will include labor. So we are moving forward. But we do need a comprehensive act that defines what matrimonial property is and what happens upon disagreement or dissolution in a marriage. And that is what is, I suppose, coming up soon. It's a discussion that will be coming up soon.
There are a lot of young women whose husbands die.
Yes.
At 40s, 30s, whatever.
Yes.
Then, after that, brothers and mothers-in-law and all the relatives of the young man, they are kicked out.
Yeah.
Or they're dispossessed.
Yes.
They are told to go, I don't know, I don't want to talk about inheritance, but in Central Province instance, lots of young women are being thrown out of homes after their husbands die. I don't know whether that law caters for that, or where is that catered for?
It is in the Law of Succession Act.
So, which you cannot,
Yeah,
okay.
and it's also under reform. But it is true what you say, Mutegi, it's been happening.
Yeah.
And this is what we are saying. Can we look at ourselves and what's happening out there? Those people you've talked about, the communities and the families you've talked about, and then make sure that we protect them in our new Law of Succession Act, in the reforms to the Law of Succession Act. That's all we are saying, because we don't live in a vacuum. We live in a proper environment, the one that you're talking about. Yeah.
Okay, we'd just like to sample some of the questions coming in before we wrap this up and get your expert opinion on the matter. A question coming in here, somebody who's not saying their name, but they'd say, I would like to know whether customary marriages are binding. If a man goes ahead and marries another woman, is the woman and the kids entitled to the share of the estate?
Absolutely. It's customary marriage. It is a marriage under custom. You're entitled to all the other rights that go with the other unions. And that's the other thing. You know why that question is being asked? Because before, our marriages under custom have been under the table and the others have been above the table. So people didn't think that they have the same rights as couples married in other marriages.
Okay, fantastic. Tegi, do you have any additional comments?
I don't know. We discussed that you cannot marry traditionally or customary, then you go to Christian.
Yes.
You can't if you have two wives.
If you have two wives, you can't. But
can't.
Incidentally, that's an interesting one. Yes, you can't. But you can't embrace monogamy if you have two wives. Because then it means you're doing away with one.
But the Christians will not allow me to marry two wives.
No, they will not allow you. You
So
have to
if I want to be a Christian and
Yes.
I'm married through, I'm a polygamous, of a polygamous situation, I have two wives, married them traditionally, I paid all the dowries. Now I want to convert to Christianity. And I want to go to heaven. I want to be baptized, I go to heaven and marry through the Christian, so that because you can't go to heaven unless you go to the church. Whatever. I want to wed with the other woman or the other women, wives.
No, Mutagi, the fact that you have two wives doesn't mean you can't be a Christian. They are Christians.
But I have to get married.
No. They are Christians who chose the African customs. They go to church every Sunday and they'll tell you they have two wives. So for me, it doesn't mean that because you have two wives, you have to stay at home when the others are going to church on Sunday. You can go to church, and you know what? God can forgive you, and God will embrace you in whatever circumstances He finds you.
Can by my church, whether Catholic or Protestant, can they marry me?
They can
and
marry.
Give me a ring and give me a marriage certificate.
But Mutegi, they'll be unfair to one wife, isn't it? If they marry
but I want
you,
to be a Christian. I want to go to a Christian marriage.
You know.
I'm married and polygamous.
No, you can't make that choice. If you're polygamous, you stay. So we are trying to tell you, when you're sitting here and you're deciding to get married, don't just see today the love and commitment, the love. See beyond it. What do you intend for yourself? But it's not to say that when you're polygamous, you cannot become a Christian. Absolutely. There are many Christians who are polygamous. What we are saying, intend, choose, and make a decision.
But according to the church, if you're not married, you are Christian married. It's difficult for you to go to heaven. You are sinner.
Unfortunately, we are running out of time. I just want to wrap up by asking you a few questions, which some of our viewers have sent in. Somebody says we'd like to ask the expert in studio what the bill says on women who run away from their matrimonial homes for several years only to come and claim the property when the husband is dead. That's one question. And the last question, which we're going to wrap up on here, is during a divorce, can a man ask to have custody of the children and have the wife send financial support monthly?
Indeed. I need to say this. You know, those acts, the ones we talked about, the 7 acts, none of them allows a man to claim maintenance from the wife. But since our constitution, the same rights available to a wife are available to a man. So a man may claim maintenance. Can a husband ask for custody of the children? Yes, he can. In fact, we have very many men in the children's court asking for custody. What the court determines now is the best interest of the child. So if the best interest is for the child to go with the father, then absolutely. But of course, the mother will remain participating. And then you're talking about this woman who abandons the matrimonial home and comes to claim property upon the death of the husband. The Law of Succession Act at Section 29 says that the people who will inherit from the husband are wives, former wives, okay?
Former wives.
So wife and former wife. So a former wife as well is entitled to inheritance. Of course, the court will consider whether she had been settled. Because if you had got your property during your lifetime, you know, then you shouldn't come upon his death to get more, right? But if you hadn't been settled, then you will be one of the people who inherit. Cases depend on their own facts and in their own circumstances.
Okay, fantastic.
Yes.
Mutegi, do you have any closing remarks or questions before we wrap up?
The only concern is about that polygamous man who is
He's still there. You know, we need to have this conversation, you know, with your church. In fact, we need a churchman here, and he will tell you, you know, God will forgive you, you know, for anything. And so, by the way, it's not. See, we're saying it's in the law that you can have polygamy. The Christians will not accept to marry you to two wives, but it's not to say that you are not in contact, you cannot go to church. It's not to say that you cannot go to heaven. Talk to your God directly. But Michelle, if you allow me, there's something that I'd like to say in closing, and to say that the discussions we've had here and the discussions on family law and on marriage bill are very personal discussions, because, you know, everybody's looking at this bill and thinking, how does it affect me? Perhaps a Christian is sitting and thinking, how can they allow polygamy? I want you to consider the following, that this bill is actually for the country at large. In this country, we have very dynamic circumstances. We have Muslims. It is not our business to say how Muslims should marry, any more than it's their business to say how Christians should marry. We have Hindus. We also have people, African people who chose African customary law. So if I'm sitting, because I am a Christian, I need to be able to understand that outside of my church doors, there are people who wish to have a different system of law applied to them. And I need to be willing to give them that space, as I need them to give me the space to choose Christianity. So I need us to just have that debate. And I know it's a very personal one, but have it within yourself and see what works for you. Is it covered here? But allow other people to have what works for them covered in this bill, so that we can move forward.
So it's a holistic bill.
Indeed, absolutely.
Okay, fantastic. Now, one thing that we didn't actually touch on today was the matrimonial property bill. Maybe we could have you come back in studio at some time to discuss that a bit further, because there were quite a few questions that people were posing in regard to that. So we'd love to have you back here to discuss that further. But thank you very much.
Is that also in Parliament, the matrimonial property?
It was published the other day, I think the 5th of July. So it is
come for debate.
It's going to come. Well, I don't know that they have a schedule yet, but it's there, and it's important to have that discussion.
Then you need to come very soon.
Take me for granted. Anytime you want me, I'll be here.
We will, absolutely. But thank you so much, Judy, for coming to the studio.
Thank you.
I think this has been so insightful.
I'm glad.
Absolutely. So thank you very much. So that has been Judy, who was in studio, Judy Thongori, a lawyer, family lawyer, who's answered most of your queries and questions on the marriage bill. We hope that that has answered any queries that you had on the marriage bill. But thank you very much for being in studio. That wraps up our studio interview about the controversial marriage bill. Stay with us. At the top of the hour, we are going to have more news coming up. So keep it Citizen Power Breakfast. Such a heated debate.